institutional facts are identical with status functions. Wherever you have an institutional fact, you have a status function. But the status function always gives you a certain type of power. And the names for those powers in English are rights, obligations, authorizations, permissions, and various sorts of officially or unofficially sanctioned statuses. And these powers, just to have a general term, I call deontic powers. So you get deontic powers such as rights, duties, and obligations. Often those are positive powers. So the President of the United States has the right to veto congressional legislation, but often there are negative powers. The President is under an obligation to do certain things. It sometimes happens to me, I hope it never happens to you, that I go out and I find on the windshield of my car a dreadful little piece of paper put there by the police. Now, that imposes on me a negative power. It's called a parking ticket. I don't know what it is in Spanish. It imposes on me a negative power. I'm now under an obligation. It's now an obscene amount of money. It's $50 in the city of Berkeley. I hope it's not that bad here. But now, it's a typical institutional fact. It is a status function. There's nothing intrinsic to the paper that gives it this power, but it imposes on me a negative deontic power, and that negative deontic power has a remarkable effect on me, and that is it creates reasons for action which are independent of my inclinations. So these create what I call desire-independent reasons for action. And this is where it seems to me human beings differ from all other forms of social animals known to me. They create institutional facts, all of which are cases of status functions, where we impose a status on a person or an object, where the person or object cannot perform that function solely in virtue of the physical structure of the person or the object, but only in virtue of the fact that there is a collectively recognized or accepted status which the person or the object has, and that status implies deontic powers, rights, duties, authorizations, permission. The person who has a 10-euro note has a power. He now has a right to buy something with that 10-euro note. Why? Because that gives desire-independent reasons for action. A nice man invites me to come and give a talk in Madrid, and on the day in question, I think, do I really want to go and get on an airplane? Do I want to stand in line at airports? Do I want to have to take my shoes off? You don't have to do that in Europe, but you're more civilized. In the United States, I won't do it. I won't demonstrate. We have to take our shoes off. And then it gets worse. Do I want to sit next to somebody who's trying to put his elbow where I'm trying to put my elbow? That's always happens to me. And do I want to eat airplane food? No, I don't want to do any of those things. But all the same, I come to Madrid. Guess why? I made a promise. I created a status function, an institutional fact that gave me desire-independent reason for action. Now I'm making a very strong claim, and I want to save time for discussion, but I want a chance to discuss this, and the basic idea is this. What distinguishes humans from other forms of social animals known to me is that they have the power to create status functions, and these status functions are, and that is no exaggeration now, to say they are the glue that holds human civilization together, because they enable human beings to do something that my dog can't do. I have a wonderful dog. His name is Gilbert. He's very intelligent. I've had 4 dogs. They're Frege, Russell, Ludwig, and Gilbert. And they're all in varying degrees of intelligence, but they do not have the ability to act on desire-independent reasons for action. They do not have the ability to lock into a system of status functions. That requires a certain type of language, and I'm going to get to that in a moment. But the basic idea that I'm putting forward now is that all of the distinctively human traits that we regard as features of institutions, such as human rights, property rights, governments, money, property, marriage, as well as informal institutions like cocktail parties and love affairs, all of those are cases of status functions where people know what to expect. They know what sorts of rights, duties, and obligations go with the status. Okay, now I want to come to an interesting... Now, how are we doing for time? Have I got another few minutes? Where's the boss? Okay, all right. Now, here's the interesting thing. You might say, well, look, on your account, language is just one institution among others. No, it's not. Language is the fundamental institution because it enables us to create all of the other institutions. You can imagine a society that has a language but does not have money, property, government, and marriage. But it seems to me you cannot imagine a converse. If somebody says, well, we found this society in the Amazon basin, and they have a rich government, and they have lots of private property and money, but they don't have any language. They don't communicate linguistically at all. That seems to me impossible. Whereas the other is not impossible. There's a friend of mine, Dan Everett, who's investigating a tribe in the Amazon basin, and they don't have much by way of institutional structures. The Piraha, and in fact, their language is remarkably restricted relative to ours. They have no color words. They can't say it looks red. They have to say it looks like blood. They can't count. They have no numerals. So their language is remarkably restricted relative to ours, but they do have some institutions. They do have a kind of marriage and a kind of private property. But it seems to me the converse is not the case. You could not imagine a language that had a rich system of institutions, but you cannot imagine a culture that had a rich system of institutions, but no language whatever. Language is the fundamental social institution. Why? Because all other institutional facts are created by repeated applications of precisely the same speech act, the status function declaration. And in the status function declaration, you make something the case by representing it as being the case. There's a kind of magic in the status function declarations, but the amazing thing is human beings get away with it. We accept it. How do they get away with it? We accept it. Now let's slow down and ponder that a moment. Declarations have always struck me as a very odd speech act anyway. When God said, "Let there be light," that's a declaration. It doesn't mean, Sam over there, turn on the lights, and it doesn't mean, it's not a directive, it doesn't mean, it's not a commissive, it doesn't mean when I get around to it I'll make light for you folks. It doesn't mean, oh, there's already enough light. It doesn't mean any of that. It means by this very speech act I make it the case that there is light. Okay, now God can do that because he or she has supernatural powers. We don't have those powers, but we have an analogous form of magic. We can create corporations just by saying, let this be a corporation. I'm always interested in how you do it in different languages. In French, it's qu'il soit la lumière. And in German, I guess, für das Licht. I don't know, well, you'll have somebody have to teach me what it is in Spanish later on. But in any case, the oddity of the syntax suggests that something interesting is going on here in these declarations. Okay, we can't do it when it comes to light, but we can do it with money, property, government, marriage, corporations, not to mention universities, doctors, lawyers, and cocktail parties. All of those are created by status function declarations. Okay, now I want to suggest some differences. I want to save time for questions. So let me finish rapidly by talking about some differences between language and other institutions. You might say, look, on the account you've been giving us, language is just like any other institution. So, for example, being elected president, getting a majority of the electoral votes, and being sworn in counts as being president of the United States. Similarly, saying snow is white counts as making the statement that snow is white in English. What's the difference? Well, it seems to me there is an enormous difference between the two cases, because in the case of the English sentence, snow is white, the meaning of the sentence by itself is enough to determine that the utterance of the sentence, snow is white, counts as making the statement that snow is white. But in the case of making somebody the president of the United States, the meaning of the sentence, he is president of the United States, is not enough to make him president of the United States. Here is another remarkable fact about human institutional reality. We use semantics, we use the meanings of the sentences to create powers that go beyond the powers of the semantics. So semantics created Barack Obama as president of the United States. He's president because we represent him as being president. But the powers of the presidency go far beyond semantics. We use the semantics to create extra semantic, extra linguistic powers. But in the case of language itself, the utterance of the sentence by itself, when I make an assertion, snow is white, or I ask you what time it is, what time is it, that does not create powers that go beyond the semantics. The powers there are the powers of meaning. So you might say, look, the formula X counts as Y and C works for sentences as much as it does for any other institution. So uttering this sentence, snow is white, counts as making the statement that snow is white. And performing certain acts counts as becoming president of the United States. But there is a huge difference, and that has to do with the nature of meaning. In the case of the meanings of sentences, meaning alone is sufficient to determine that the speech act will be performed with the utterance of that sentence. But in the case of institutional reality, and this is why it's a status function declaration and not a report, we use the meaning to create a reality that goes beyond meaning. So now we see a deeper sense in which human institutional reality, though created by language, goes beyond semantic powers. We use semantics to create a reality that goes beyond semantics. Okay, well now, as I said, I want to leave time for questions, so how are we doing? I mean, okay, so I'm going to just summarize what I've been saying, and then I'll open this up to questions. Basically, the idea is this. I wrote a book a long time ago called Speech Acts, and I thought the secret of the Speech Act was this constitutive rule. And I was looking at the analogy, which was very common in that time, between speaking a language and playing a game. We got this from Wittgenstein, and Austin had the same idea that there are rules of language as there are rules of games. And we could see language as having rules analogous to the rules of games. And I tried to work that out. But it seems to me that's mistaken in a very deep sense, and that is, we only understand the rules of games because we already understand language.